Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's vitamin D story with Scott Geiselhart, who has been traveling all around the country as part of his Seeing in Color Again project. And Scott has an amazing story about his personal experience with vitamin D and how it has changed his life, but also with what he went through himself and how he's changing the lives of so many others around the country and I don't know, quite possibly the world. But Scott, thank you so much for being here. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yes, I was a volunteer firefighter in a small town in Minnesota for 24 years. And at year 18, I ended up being I found out I had PTSD after a suicide attempt. So now, the last over 10 years, since 2014, I've been traveling around the country sharing my story about, it's okay to reach out for help. And, I didn't know anything about PTSD till after a suicide attempt. I didn't understand how that could be possible as an assistant chief.
And what were you doing before that, just out of curiosity, and in what part of the country do you live?
I live in Fargo, North Dakota now. I was a firefighter in Frazee, Minnesota. I also owned a repair shop, so I was a mechanic plus the owner of the shop. So that was my main job. Volunteer firefighters don't get paid a whole lot to make a living off of it. So
Hmm.
um, yeah,
Yeah,
volunteer
very.
firefighter, and then um, I was also worked in mental health crisis stabilization for 4.5 years.
Oh, so you
After
were doing that. Oh, after,
yeah,
after.
after I recovered and made a full recovery thanks to therapy.
Okay. Okay. So what was it that brought you to vitamin D? Was it one of your therapists? Was it one of your mental health doctors? Or how did vitamin D come into the picture for you?
Well, I spoke at a nurse's nursing school, and the instructor, talked to me. And she was talking to her students about it, about all sorts of different things, omega 3s and vitamin D especially. And in Minnesota and North Dakota, we don't get a whole lot of sunlight. And I got talking to her, and one thing led to another, and she just kind of gave me a list of stuff I should look into, the vitamins, and because I was taking nothing. And with a background in mental health and suicide and depression and things like that, she just gave me a list and asked if I was doing any and taking any of these vitamins, and I said no. And lo and behold, throughout my life, I've had a lot of muscle spasms. I mean, severe muscle spasms in my chest and stomach and back, and they were kind of on the surface level, and they weren't from any injury, and they went all over the body, and they would happen just, I mean, crawling into bed, crawling out of bed, driving down the road, and I just didn't understand what was going on. Finally, after going to the emergency room a bunch of times and going and asking doctors over the years what's going on, I finally seen a neurologist, and he did ran some tests, came back and said, "Have you ever had your vitamin D tested?" I said, "No." And he goes, "Well, you should have." He goes, "You're down to a number 12." And he goes, "We got to get that up." And the rest is history. I got it up, and the muscle spasms went away. I started feeling better. I mean, it's almost like, why couldn't they tested that years ago and found this? Because I can actually lay down and try to do a sit up now, where before I couldn't do a sit up. I mean, it would just spaz.
Wow. Wow. And so you had your level tested. How long before or after you learned about it from the nurse?
Um, Probably about 3 months after,
Okay.
and it was like, hello world, she told me about this stuff, and
So
I
you
don't.
weren't convinced right away until your doctor said, and you're so lucky to have a doctor who actually tested your vitamin D level,
Exactly.
because a lot of them don't. Uh, so, okay, and how much did he tell you to take again?
I started out with 50,000 one time a week,
Okay, and how much do you
and
take now?
now I take 10,000 a day, and it seems to be good. I'm not the best at taking medications, so sometimes I miss, and so it kind of averages out to 50,000. But now I'm taking it all the time, because I did have a time where I felt good and I stopped taking the vitamin D because I didn't have time, or I didn't have the meds with me, or And I started the muscle spasms came back. And then the levels went down again. They tested me again. The level was down. So it's like, it is connection there.
Right, right. So, how else have you noticed any other differences since you've started taking the vitamin D in your overall health, well-being? And are there others around you that you've shared this information about vitamin D with who have also benefited from it?
Well, I've noticed the studies because I do a lot of suicide prevention work and also PTSD and addiction. And I've seen the studies where the low vitamin D seems to have a connection with suicide attempts. And I've noticed it in my mental health. Um, I mean, I always wanted to go out and help people, but now it's like I've even got a clearer head than what I did before.
Mhm.
And thoughts are coming to me, and I used to use alcohol a lot. Even still now, I used to go out and drink quite a bit. And it's almost like I don't know. It's almost like I was trying to cover up something with the alcohol because I'd get depressed more. So now I don't get as depressed, so I don't drink as much. It's
Mhm.
and I don't know if that's a connection there or not, but it just seems like I'm healthier now. And I take
Yeah.
magnesium along also. So I also take magnesium, and I'm looking on starting some omega-3.
And you get some sunshine too when you can up in North Dakota.
Yeah, when we can.
It's pretty amazing, unbelievable that a vitamin could possibly make such a difference in our health and in our mental health. But when you step back and look, there's so many studies that really do show a strong correlation between vitamin D levels, vitamin D intake, and depression and suicide. And so, if you wouldn't mind sharing just a little bit more about what you travel around talking about and who you're helping so that we can connect you with people who might need to learn a little more from you.
Yeah, I started out speaking to first responders, mainly small town volunteers like I was. And it didn't take long. They had me on the national stage at like the International Association of Fire Chiefs, EMDR International Association, which is a therapy. And I spoke in front of therapists from around the world. And I know I was probably the only one in the audience that didn't even have a bachelor's degree. The rest of them probably had masters. But I got a chance to speak in front of them. And it just goes from high schools all the way up to retirement centers. I mean, we all have mental health. And when I was working in mental health crisis stabilization, one of the main things we did when somebody came in crisis was we sent them in for a physical.
Mhm.
And looking back, it's like, man, I wish I would have said, "Are you make sure you get your vitamin D tested?" Because what we'd find is a lot of times they were coming back and they had UTIs, urine tract infections, and that messes with your mind too. So,
Yep.
I mean, if your body isn't regulating correctly, all sorts of things can happen. And we did the med tests, make sure that meds were, not competing against each other. But yeah, it's amazing the vitamin D and talking with other first responders and having them, not just first responders, but when I talk now and especially one-on-ones, it's like, hey, have you checked your vitamin D? And a lot of times they don't test it.
Mhm.
It
Yeah, and with
takes, oh, sorry,
you
go ahead.
first responders are covered, you're wearing long sleeves and pants all day long. And so even when you're outside, you're not necessarily, that sun's not hitting the skin to make the vitamin D. Um, but beyond vitamin D, is there anything else that you would like to say, any message that you would like to say to anybody who might want to reach out to you or anybody who might be struggling the way you were struggling? What other just from the heart messages would you like to send before we close up today?
I struggled for years with suicidal thoughts, with anger, with nightmares, with flashbacks. I became a monster. I pushed people out of my life, isolated a lot, drank a lot, got into meth, unhealthy coping skill, and I tumbled. I mean, I didn't have the education to understand what PTSD was. If somebody would have put up the signs and symptoms of PTSD up in front of me, it probably would have clicked like, oh, okay, this is what's going on. I don't have a split personality. I've got PTSD. And to reach out for help. I mean, from my suicide attempt to the end of my therapy was about a month, 6 sessions of EMDR, and I came out smiling. I couldn't stop smiling. And, you know, why couldn't have I done this before? Why didn't somebody show me what PTSD was, especially as first responders? We're high risk. And yet we never talked about it. And, I was assistant chief. I didn't even know about it. They didn't talk about it at conferences. So, it doesn't really surprise me now that they have me up in front of hundreds of first responders and just telling my story. And I'm one of them. And I can see it in their eyes that they get it too. It's so important to reach out for help, save your relationships. Suicide sucks. Addiction sucks. PTSD sucks. But PTSD does not have to be a life and death sentence. Just reach out for help and accept the help and get your life back.
Yeah, because you can.
Yeah.
So how can people get a hold of you and learn more about you?
Seeincoloragain.com is my website. And then my email, scott.geiselhart@gmail.com. And if you actually just Google my name, you'll find a lot of information. And my phone number is out there. If you Google my name, there's business cards that have been put out there and stuff. So if you want to reach out and talk to me one-on-one, that's basically what I do now. Is I've lived through it. Um, I get it, and that's what saved my life. Was after my suicide attempt, I kind of did things backwards. I reached out for help, and another first responder answered the phone that understood PTSD, and that's what saved my life.
Thank goodness. Well, I'll include those links and your email and contact information with this video below. Um, and I really thank you for your time, Scott, today, and for all the time that your energy, your heart, you're dedicating to so many people around the world, because I know how hard it can be for people to ask for help and reach out and admit that they're struggling. And the world needs more people like you. So a conversation well beyond vitamin D, but you gotta support your body, your health by having optimal vitamin D levels. And it seems unfathomable that such a little nutrient can make a big difference, but it can play a big part. It's not the only answer, obviously, but having that as you're supporting all other areas of your physical and mental health is absolutely essential. So thank you again, Scott, and we'll have you back one of these days.
That'd be great. Thank you.